The absolutism and legalism of natural law ethics can lead to morally questionable conclusions. Abortion, contraception, and male masturbation are all deemed intrinsically evil. They're wrong even when an abortion can save a woman's life, contraception can prevent the spread of AIDS, and masturbation is part of IVF. This rigidity can seem out of step with contemporary moral thinking. Can natural law address these conflicts, or is it restrained by its strict principles? The Doctrine of Double Effect attempts to ease some of this stringency. According to this doctrine, in situations of moral conflict, one may perform an action that contradicts a primary precept, as long as it is not the intention to violate the natural law. A common example is killing in self-defense. Here, the intention to conform with the primary precept to protect and preserve life also results in its violation, namely the death of the attacker. However, the act is justified by the doctrine of double effect. The doctrine, however, can lead to inconsistent results. Let's take abortion as our example. In an ectopic pregnancy, the ovum fails to progress from the fallopian tube to the uterus. If the fetus is allowed to develop in the fallopian tube, the mother will die. Natural law ethics allows the removal of the fallopian tube containing the fetus, despite the resulting death of the fetus, because the death of the fetus is an unintended consequence of the operation. Now consider that medical advancements have made it possible to remove and therefore abort the fetus without damaging the fallopian tube. Great news, right? The result in both cases is the same, with the added benefit that the mother's ability to carry future children is left intact. Well, not if you're the Catholic Church. In this case, unlike the first one, the intention is to abort the fetus. Therefore, the abortion is not permissible under the doctrine of double effect. For many, this overemphasis on whether the bad effect is intended, neglecting other moral criteria including our good intentions, appears to lead to double standards. Enter proportionalism. Proportionalism holds that there are certain moral rules, and it can never be right to go against these rules unless there is a proportionate reason which would justify it. Proportionalism is an ethical theory that supports the objectives of natural law theory, while also being sympathetic to consequentialist thinking. Consequentialism holds that the rightness or wrongness of an action is determined by its consequences. Proportionalism seeks to, as proponent Bernard Hughes says, point out the inconsistency and invalidity of such thinking as that in the abortion cases described earlier. Hughes supports abortion in cases of ectopic pregnancy. For Hughes, such abortions are the lesser of two evils and a proportionate response. So there are two important factors at work here, a proportionate response and intention. Let's talk about how we determine whether a response is proportionate. In determining whether an action is morally right or wrong, we must weigh the value of the act, the positive consequences, against the disvalue of the act, the negative consequences. Proportionalism will not sanction a mother who terminates a pregnancy because she fears a disruption in her career progression if she has a baby. Here, the value of the abortion, not interrupting her career, does not outweigh the disvalue, violating the primary precepts protect life and reproduction. Because the disvalue of the abortion outweigh its value, and the agent does not have a moral intention, her intention is the destruction of the fetus, proportionalism would render the act morally unjustifiable, as would natural law ethics. However, if a woman wishes to terminate a pregnancy that threatens her life, the result is different. This time, she intends to preserve her life, a moral intention that aligns with the primary precepts, and the value of this abortion outweighs its disvalue. Specifically, her life is preserved, her other children, if she has them, are not left motherless, and she may be able to conceive again in the future. This outweighs the disvalue of the destruction of the fetus. Proportionalism, unlike natural law ethics in this case, morally justifies the act. Now let's talk about intention. Central to proportionalism is the distinction it draws between pre-moral and moral acts. For the morally absolute natural law ethics, certain actions such as abortion are intrinsically evil, and the intention behind the act has no bearing on its morality. In contrast, proportionalism argues that we can only determine the pre-moral or ontic goodness or badness of an act until we understand the intention behind the act. If a surgeon cuts human flesh, it is not good or bad in itself. We need to know why. What if a murderer who happens to be a surgeon is cutting someone up with the intention of killing them? Well, now we have an immoral act, but the act of cutting the flesh is, in itself, pre-moral. Now that we've made this distinction and clarified what is meant by a proportionate response, we can canvass a standard form of proportionalism. 1. To determine whether an act is moral or immoral, we must consider the intention of the moral agent. 2. Ignoring the intention only reveals the pre-moral status of the action, not its morality. 3. Acts become morally good or bad only when we consider the proportion of value to disvalue in the act and the agent's intention. 4. Therefore, there are no intrinsically evil acts. The rightness or wrongness of an act depends on the value versus disvalue of the act and the agent's intention in the situation. Abortion, as we have seen, is a pre-moral act. It is the calculation of value against disvalue and the intention of the agent in each case that determines the overall morality of the action. It's important to note that proportionalists reject that they endorse consequentialist reasoning. They insist that proportionalism is the practical application of natural law to bring about a proportionate good. That is even consistent, sometimes, with Aquinas' own thinking. For example, Aquinas argued that a starving man would be justified in stealing to survive. The Catholic Church, however, has condemned proportionalism as a form of consequentialism. The consequentialist nature of proportionalism also opens it up to criticism. How can one accurately predict the resulting value and disvalue of their actions? And how can the value and disvalue be correctly weighed? Proportionists reject any calculus, such as the hedonic calculus proposed by utilitarian Jeremy Bentham, and seemingly leave it up to the intuition of the moral agent. Furthermore, some may be tempted to argue that certain actions, such as rape or the torture of a child, just are intrinsically wrong, a position that proportionalism doesn't accept. We may find the validity of such theories questionable. What do you think about proportionalism? Does it solve the problems inherent in natural law ethics, or does it create its own? And can it offer a more compassionate and flexible approach to modern ethical dilemmas? I look forward to reading your comments. For now, thank you for watching, and see you next time.